Um que é muito evidente, que é a produtividade, ao mesmo tempo que você regenera o ambiente, seja resiliente, né, e se recupere de forma muito mais rápida, ao mesmo tempo que ele te dá de retorno ao alimento e uma condição de bem-estar. E agora a gente está pegando mais um pedacinho aqui de pasto para transformar também numa agrofloresta. Então, uma área que não foi cultivada, tem um histórico aí de mais de 10 anos, né, utilizada de certa forma como pasto, né, e ultimamente estava aqui como mombaça e a braquiária, né, que estava criando essa condição de acumulação para que quando a gente, né, chegasse aqui nesse ponto para implantar essa nova área, a gente tivesse bastante biomassa para fazer a cobertura do solo. Então, esse para mim é o principal benefício ecológico da agrofloresta, mas tem, por exemplo, a água, né? A gente consegue, com a agrofloresta, criar condições de estratificação das raízes, das copas, de cobertura do solo. Então, você cria uma condição da água circular no ambiente e cumprir a função dela em diversos nichos ecológicos, né? Então, você torna presente a água, né? E, consequentemente, você vai ter mais vida, mais biodiversidade, né? Outro benefício ecológico da agrofloresta é essa condição de regeneração da biodiversidade do ecossistema. Então, a gente observa que muita gente tem feito pesquisas sobre plantas que estão basicamente em extinção, principalmente nos ambientes, né, que a gente vê próximo aos centros urbanos, né? Então, as pessoas estão trazendo a essas plantas, resgatando essas plantas que são nobres, plantas que cumprem funções muito importantes no meio ambiente, né? E também, consequentemente, criando condições para que o banco genético do solo, o banco de sementes do solo possa também vir à tona. Então, você cria uma condição de biodiversidade de muitas espécies interagindo naquele ambiente. E a gente observa também a segurança nutricional. Então, a gente percebe que muitas famílias, né, que entraram nessa cultura da produção, né, de monocultura, ficavam muito em risco, né, ficavam dependentes daquela produção única, né, então isso causava um certo estresse nas áreas rurais, nas áreas produtivas, porque você ficava, de certa forma, refém de um determinado produto e você vende aquele produto para poder adquirir outros, né? Então é uma lógica que não faz muito sentido. Então as pessoas que praticam a agrofloresta, né, que criam essa condição de biodiversidade, têm uma maior segurança nutricional, porque se alimentam com plantas com diversos papéis na nossa saúde, né? Plantas, enfim, que selvagens também, plantas que não foram de certa forma domesticadas, então possuem um valor nutricional muito maior, né? Sementes crioulas, enfim, então você cria uma condição de maior segurança nutricional, segurança alimentar, porque você trabalha com biodiversidade, então você vai estar sempre colhendo, né? Então você não vai ficar dependente de uma única cultura. A gente pode observar diversos benefícios sociais assim que a agrofloresta permite, né, que vem, enfim, claramente se manifestando em diversas comunidades que eu tenho visitado no Brasil afora, né? A gente tem visto que o sentido de cooperação na comunidade fica muito mais forte quando a gente implanta agroflorestas. A gente promove esse encontro, né, onde as pessoas vêm com um objetivo comum que é regenerar e produzir alimentos saudáveis, né? Isso é muito nobre e isso cria essa condição, né, desse encontro criar mais união, né, uma vida comunitária com mais cooperação, com mais amor incondicional, com mais prazer interno, né? Ou seja, a gente vê na prática os princípios da agricultura citrópica, da agrofloresta sendo colocados dentro de um ambiente não só da agricultura, mas no ambiente das relações comunitárias.
De tanto levar frechada do teu olhar, meu peito até parece.
Bom, voltamos, né? De
We're
novo.
back. We're back after this amazing class that we had. I think undoubtedly we will have several fruits coming from the teachings that we have heard from those wonderful women that shared with us. Later, undoubtedly, we'll look at all the links and all references that Mari sent. We'll make them available on the website so that you have access. And obviously, the entire forum is being recorded. It will be made available so everybody who get on our website on maps will be able to see and re-see and reflect upon everything that we're sharing here. Now it is time, final moments of 2 very intense days, indeed very happy days. People ask me, are you tired? I say, no, I'm happy. I am actually happy with the possibility of being able to disseminate ideas that we're bringing and the work that are here that are already involved in responsible, sustainable tourism in Brazil and all over the world. Happy for being able to bring to give a platform to black tourism, to indigenous tourism, to community-based tourism. And this can be part not only of this moment, but of every day, but everybody's life, every day. Now we're gonna start this panel, and I've been mentioning about it for along the forum several times. For me, this is a very much of a conclusive, it's closure, this panel, that's what it is, because we are going to bring tourism as a perspective beyond sustainability, beyond responsibility. We're gonna speak about a regenerative tourism. Now we're bringing here to us the benchmark of regenerative tourism, Bento Cruz and Bill Reed. Bento Cruz, please switch on our cameras. Everybody wants to see you. Bill Reed is with us. Bento Reed. Those are the two people we have in the panel, two experts who will share with us the possible feasible pathways and how we can bring regenerative tourism to Brazil. And Bill, I want to tell the story. I should share. I've been following Bill's work for some time. His company is called Regeneration. You can look at Regeneration. You can look it up. There are 3 offices in the U.S., in Massachusetts, in New Mexico, and the other one I forget the location now. But I've already sent I had already sent emails before. You know, I got in touch through the contact email of the website because I didn't know him really. But when the date was coming closer, and I said, no, I gotta get a hold of him. And I chose the one phone number, and I chose the one that I thought most likely this is gonna get me Bill on the line. And I've telephoned on my cell phone from Brazil, and a man picks up the phone and he says hello, and I'm going, have I dialed the wrong number? And I asked, is this Regenesis? The person on the other line said yes. And I explained, look, I'm calling from Brazil, my name is Carla, and I really wanted to either speak to Bill Reed or some other person who works with him. All of a sudden the person says, hi Carla, this is Bill. I was like, Bill? Really? Is this Bill on the line? And I was so curious because he picked up the phone. He answered the call. He never picks up phone. He's the CEO and founder of Regenesis. He's got a bunch of books published. And I'm going to read his curriculum. And it's unbelievable. I think the universe really aligned all the stars to have Bill answered. He never picks up the phone, and he heard me for like 5 minutes very quickly, and I'm thinking, oh my God, This crazy Brazilian lady calling me, wanting to invite me to this event right off the bat. And he heard me and he took it in and he took us in and he's here with us today. So really, so how can that be explained? Serendipity, universal serendipity. And we have with us Bento Cruz. Bento Cruz, he is that kind of person. Um, every seed, if it's like 3 seeds he throws, 8 flourish. And look, I'm not just speaking about agroflorist seeds. I'm talking about life seeds. Bento is a person who is here. He's got this gorgeous story that I'm going to read for you. He's an anthropologist. That's his major. In this long career in this hole, he's got 34 years. He is 34 years old, so he's still a child, but he's got an old soul. He's been teaching courses about agroforest. He is part of PTC, of pharmaculture. You've seen Bento's video right in the introduction speaking about agroforest. So Bento, in all courses he teaches, in fact, if he's got 50 students in a course, 30, 40 decide to change lives, to do things about sustainability, to the regeneration of the planet. So indeed, Bento has a gift. We've been friends for a long time. We've been discussing a lot. Well, it's been 2 years, but we've got this relationship because he's guy has this gift of getting into people's lives and change course and really take the right course, the course of regenerating our planet. And he's done this to me. Maps actually is very much has much to do with Bento's work. So gratitude, dear Bento. So let me start with intros, official intros. Bill, Reed, and Bento Cruz. Bill Reed is an internationally recognized planning consultant. Apologies, is it in English? And I'm trying to translate this. I'll read it in English, so please switch to Portuguese because I'm going to switch to English.
Planning consultant, design process facilitator, lecturer, and author in sustainability and regeneration. He's principal of Regenesis, a regenerative design, living system integrator, and education organization. His work centers on creating the framework for and managing an integrative, whole, and living system design process. This work is known as regenerative development. It's a meta-discipline that unifies the pattern, understanding practices of ecological design, biophilia, and organization psychology into a design process that lifts building and community planning into full integration and co-evolution with living system. The objective to improve the overall quality of the physical, social, and spiritual life of our living places and therefore the planet. The relevant background. Founding member of US Green Building Council, one of the co-founders of LEED. Para quem não sabe, to those who don't know, LEED is one of the most important institution that can tell if your company, if your business is sustainable or not. And he is one of the co-founders of LEED. Co-chair of the LEED Technical Committee 1994 through 2003, book co-author with the 7 Group, The Integrative Design Guide to Green Building, Redefining the Practice of Sustainability, served on the National Executive Committee of the AYA Committee on the Environment, founding chair of the ANCI Committee on Whole System Integration, advisory board of the Environmental Building News, consulting for hundreds of green and regenerative projects throughout the world, keynote addresses and workshops at hundreds of conferences throughout the world, author, dozens of articles on green design, integrative system thinking, and regeneration, as well as peer-reviewed papers and contributing author. Guest lecturer at major universities in US, Europe, Mexico, Canada, and Australia. In addition to being considered one of the leading thinkers in this field, Bill has also consulted on over 200 green design commissions, the majority of which are LEED Gold and Platinum and Living Building Challenge projects. He's also a keynote speaker at major buildings and design events, as well as a guest lecturer throughout universities all over the world. So Bill, thank you so much. It was really a wonderful conspiracy of the universe, having you answering the phone that afternoon. It was such a look. I can't imagine how you would be here if it wasn't for that phone pickup. Thank you so much.
Nice to be here, Carla. You want to? Are you introducing Bento now, or do you want to wait?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Oh. Ok, então agora eu vou passar para a apresentação.
Now I'm going to introduce Bento. Bento Cruz is an anthropologist and permaculture in Brazil and Latin America, and collaborating projects and ideas that are innovative in design and regenerative agriculture. In his career, he's worked with sustainable development and local sustainability through tourism, community-based tourism, and permaculturing. Today, he's been working with people and institutions transitioning process who are looking for energy efficient work and ecological efficient work through consultancy work. Bento, it's really a pleasure and an honor to have you. And it's been 1.5 years now that we first thought about this very forum, and we also thought about maps, and it's here happening, and you have much to do with this, and I thank you profoundly. My pleasure, Carla. Thank you for the invite. Now, how are we going to run this panel? We're going to do the following. We're going to start off with Bill, and right after Bill, we'll hear, well, Bill was going to speak for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to follow with Bento's presentation. Bento, please silence, mute your phone. Thank you. Right after that, Bento's presentation will follow. Then we'll wrap. We'll have a quick discussion. So now we're going to have a true class from the Pope himself. Bill, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Carla, that's an introduction. Well, thank you for having me. Are you able to hear me well enough? And let me share my screen. Hope this works. Oh, it's in presentation mode. How is this showing up on your? Are you seeing the whole presentation mode? I can't hear you, Carla.
You have to put in the presentation mode, because we were seeing like the frame of your computer and everything.
Yeah, I did put it in that, and that's very strange. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
No problem. We can see the presentation.
I might leave it like that. Let me just try once more.
Okay, go ahead.
There we go. Now it worked. Okay.
You're not sharing the screen. You have to share the screen again.
Oh. That should
Okay,
work.
perfect.
Beautiful. Okay, well, I am going to try to give an overview of this work and what it means, a little the philosophical background, a taste of some of the dimensions of it. It is truly a paradigm shift, so it's tough if you it's tough just to explain it. Let's see what we can do. And I would appreciate any questions from the audience to stop me in the middle of this if you are having trouble understanding me or some of the concepts that I'm raising. And by the way, the company, it's a Regenesis group. There is a Regenesis out there, and that's not us. So just to make a distinction. So I'm talking about regenerative development, and development in the concept and the construct of evolution, not developing buildings. So how do we develop as humans? How do we develop as an evolving ecosystem and rebirthing our relationship with life? So to begin, achieving sustainability, and the SDGs in the UN are pretty much have become the benchmark these days. The question is, what do these really mean? What is the effect we are trying to produce in the world? And I encourage you to write that second question down. What is the effect we are trying to produce in the world? What's required for us to live in a sustainable condition, whatever that means? And we're going to try to define some of that this evening. And the opening question for this talk is, what are we sustaining with sustainability? And I love to shout that out to audiences. And the reactions are typically humans, or we're saving resources, or we're saving the atmosphere. And all those are true, but the fundamental thing we are really working on is we are sustaining life. And so why don't we start, if that's the premise, then why don't we start with what we're actually working on? So what is life? And of course, that's a metaphysical question that people have been trying to answer for thousands of years. But here's the best definition I've seen from Umberto Maturana in Chile, Niasnan, the author. Life is the process of becoming. I think that's such an elegant definition. It's so basic, because life continually evolves, changes, renews, develops. And we like to say life is about potential. It's not about problem. It's not about looking in the rearview mirror. It is always looking forward. And what's wonderful about working with life is that life runs up. It doesn't degrade. The second law of thermodynamics says that everything slows down. Well, when you have a living system working together, things actually improve. They become more diverse, more resilient, more dynamically stable. And the other aspect of life is a whole system. There's no boundaries around life. And so how do we work with something so complex? Well, what we've done is we've had a tendency to divide it into small pieces, fragments of green. And so what we've done with the SDGs and what we've done with LEAD is we've actually made checklists, because we love lists. We love to be able to reduce things to the smallest unit and be able to manage them. But that is the antithesis of the way life works. There is no such thing, folks, as sustainable paint or sustainable photovoltaic panels, or even a sustainable stream. And certainly there's no such thing as a sustainable building. Even though we use those terms, we're using them incorrectly, because in order for it to be sustainable, it has to be able to replicate and be born. Until a building can actually have, pardon me, I'm going to say it, until a building can actually make babies, it is not sustainable. It suffers entropy and basically rusts away and dies and causes damage. So all we can do when we're talking about LEAD or the SDGs is we are greening the world. We are making the world a better place, but it is not yet sustainable. So this diagram, maybe some of you have seen, we start with conventional design. As Randy Croxton, a green architect in New York City, says, we design our buildings one step better than breaking the law, meeting code, that kind of thing. Well, we come along with green ideas. Well, we can do better than that. We can maybe improve energy, reduce energy use by 50% or maybe 70%, or reduce water pollution. And that's what we call green. And that implies that we're working towards zero. And you hear a lot of talk about zero energy and zero damage. And that's kind of what we think might be called sustainable, but there's no such thing as zero in the universe. There's no such thing that we can't achieve zero. There's always damage going to be caused. So as long as we are thinking in this paradigm of reducing the damage, limiting the damage, we are still degenerating the planet. As long as we are, even though we're saving 90% energy in our buildings, we're still dumping 10% carbon into the atmosphere, that contributing percentage. So while it's important to do that, it is not sufficient. So we need to be working over here on the restoration side and the regeneration side. And these words mean two different things. It's very important for us to be precise about words because we can get sloppy. I heard in the last panel people talking about greenwashing. This is what allows greenwashing when we say that a dam project in India is sustainable, or an endowment for a college allows us to be sustainable. Yes, that's true, but it's not what we mean in our heart. So quickly going on here is that we have to be working in this whole system, both reducing the damage and actually creating change, positive change, restoring the damage we've caused, and regenerating our relationship with the system so that we can co-evolve with it. So we're working with an ecology, not an environment. And I actually want to suggest that we stop using the term environmentalism, because the environment is that which is outside of us. An ecology is the whole system. It's a household. That's what oikos is what it originally means in Greek. And so we are working as a whole living system. And then what does that ask of us? And this is where sustainable tourism comes in. What does it ask of us as a participant in this living system? And let me just add a couple other points here. So this is working with buildings and infrastructure. This side is working with living systems and consciousness. And I will just keep going right now. Oops, going backwards. Why is it doing that? So an example of the idea of when I said life runs up, life is full of potential. This is a stream, a civil engineer's version of a stream in Baltimore, Maryland. And this civil engineer had to actually make this stream concrete because the water from all the parking lots north of here was, when it rained, would rush through, rip up the soil, and then pollute the Chesapeake Bay. And so all the engineer could do is put concrete in, which destroyed life even further. It destroyed the gravel that fish laid their eggs in, destroyed the nutrients, it made it overheat. And basically, and then they even have to keep the trees away from the stream so they can dig out the nutrients that fall into it, because there's no fish and life to live on it. So 3 years later, the state of Maryland introduced the first stormwater management laws, probably, I think maybe in the world, but certainly in the United States. And they began to retain water. And that allowed them to come back then and retain water in the parking lots to the north, so that the flash events of the rain didn't come through and rush it out, scour it out. And they were able then to work with it in a new way. And this is what the stream looks like 3 years after that. They got rid of the concrete. And here's the stream 3 years later. So these are powerful. It's powerful to realize how powerful nature is and how fast it recovers. And we see generally in our work, and I bet you Bento could support this, is that in 18 months after engagement with working with life on its own terms, we see living systems improve. And the issue is we need to work with life, not across currents to it. The Los Plateau in China, as recorded by John Liu, they worked on this for decades and never got anywhere. But finally, they worked with the farmers, understood the patterns of life there, and in 18 months, it went from a desert to a verdant area. Alan Savory's work in Zimbabwe, even with less rain, he basically learned by observing the patterns of the antelope that they instead, there's millions, billions of antelope, maybe millions in Africa today, and they don't destroy the ecosystem. But when we introduce cattle, other ungulates into that system, we destroyed it. And all Alan Savory did was observe the patterns that when an antelope grazes, they chew the grass and they spit it, some seeds spit out of the mouth, or they defecate it and they step on it. And when they step on those seeds, they actually create a little vessel for the seed that holds moisture. And they wander off and to different pastures, different areas where it's still green, and 4 weeks later, the grass grows out of those planted seeds by the antelope stepping in them. The point of this is that he observed that if you move animals, the system will recover. And all he did with cattle in Africa was move their fences every 2 weeks. And look at what happened. In the space of 2 years, really, even in drought, the savanna started being restored. One last story, one of my favorites. This is Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is a desert, about 25 centimeters of rain a year. And a fellow bought this land, a permaculturist, and he's going to restore it. And he got rid of the grazing animals and planted native species, and he put gabions in the arroyos, the stream beds, old stream beds, to reduce the erosion because it does snow and rain. And he basically called it a day, thinking that it's going to take hundreds of years for this place to be restored. One thing you have to know is that this place is not in white man's recorded memory. The colonial settlers, they had not seen any water in this desert. But in researching this, they found out that Wild Bill Williams in 1800, Wild Bill Williams and his mountain men had come south to trap beaver in the desert. And since there's no such thing as sand beaver, they assumed that there must be water somewhere. In fact, their first inclination was to reintroduce beaver because of that, because beaver living in the desert, how does that work? And they realized that that's not going to work. 5 minutes, took them 5 minutes of thinking about that to realize it's not going to work. But what they did do is they became analog beavers. They put dams where the beavers would logically have built their dams. And the other thing you have to understand is that they looked at not only just at the historical stuff, they looked at the soil, and they found out that just under a few centimeters of dirt was rich humus, a half a meter of rich humus, which only could have come from the bottom of ponds. And they found out that the weather had not changed in 5,000 years, 25 centimeters of rain a year for the last 5,000 years. So with this clue that they were trapping beavers down here, that's why they built these dams. And within 18 months, water started appearing on the surface. And within 18 months, there was a stream that appeared that hadn't been seen in 200 years. And the reason the stream appeared is that the dams held back the water and snow that did fall and gave time to saturate the groundwater table to raise the groundwater table. And the stream is nothing but an elevated groundwater table. That might be called deep restoration. But what makes this regenerative is that every farmer in the valley said, my goodness, there's water. We can actually do this on our land. And now there's a raging, frothy stream where there was no water for the last 200 years. It takes people to help recover these systems. And it takes people to be continually engaged. And that begins to hint at the idea of regeneration. This is a quote from Kat Anderson, her book, Tending the Wild. Humans are integral with the whole system of life. We are not meant to be removed from life. We are meant to be engaged in life. And this is the opportunity for regenerative tourism. This is a quote from her book. California native peoples believe that when humans are gone from an area long enough, they lose the practical knowledge about correct interaction, and the plants and animals retreat spiritually from the earth or hide from humans. When intimate interaction ceases, the continuity of knowledge passed down through generations is broken, and the land becomes wilderness. The most diverse and healthy ecosystems on the planet have been when knowledgeable indigenous peoples have been intimately engaged in the system. Now, this may sound offensive to many indigenous peoples, but we colonial settlers, we European settlers, we white folks, if you will, need to learn to become indigenous again. So, of Gregory Bateson's quote, the major problems of the world are the result of the difference between the way nature works and the way people think. And so this talk is to introduce some of those principles, some of those different ways of thinking that will help align us with nature. And one of the most important ones is called the Law of Three. And this has been around for thousands of years, at least 4,000 years. And it can be seen as this. All life can be seen as an activating force. You want to build a resort, there's an activating force. And a restraining force. Somebody says, we don't want that here. There's a forest in the way. There's a beautiful wetland in the way. And what we typically do in our culture is we compromise. And compromise means, at least in English, means to lose. Maybe you develop a little less land, maybe only ruin half the forest, and somehow we consider that a victory. The problem with compromise is that you compromise once, and then you compromise again, and then you compromise again, and then you compromise again, and we end up in the condition we're on the planet now. So that word and that concept needs to be removed from our language. What nature does, it harmonizes. And it always harmonizes around potential. What are the possibilities for this state to be healthy? And it does not harmonize around problems, because we can argue about hundreds of problems. And if we solve one problem, then others come up and pop up. And by the way, speaking about climate change, if we think about climate change as a problem, we are likely never going to solve it, because we will end up with multiple other problems unless we invent cold fusion. But let's say we invent cold fusion somehow works and we have no carbon being dumped in the atmosphere. Have we saved the planet? We are doing, I'm just going to say, give you the answer. No, we have not, because we are doing so many other things wrong that we would have to keep fixing problem after problem. We actually need to be working on this as a whole system. So there are no problems in nature, there's only potential, and this is a perfect model for us. The problem with problem solving is that it is like riding into the future facing the past. It may eliminate what we do not want, but it does not help us to focus on what we do want. So getting back to that question, what is the effect we want to have with sustainability? What are we really looking for? I'm going to hold that answer in suspension because I think it will be apparent after this. So let me just share with you 3 case studies with some principles along with them. This is Playa Viva in Huachuca, Mexico. And a couple owned some very inexpensive land. The president of Mexico in the 1920s planted massive coconut palm plantations to make millions of dollars off of coconut oil, palm oil. And of course, because he created a gigantic monoculture, everybody went bankrupt. So this land was very cheap. So this couple bought this land. And they wanted to create a village, a resort of some sort. We were invited to help them look at this. And when we look at a system, look at a project, we never start with the project. We start with the ecosystem, because that's what is the foundation for our health. And here's the topographic map. And notice these very strange contours here. That was a big giveaway that something strange was going on. So what was strange about it, it was ancient Aztec pyramid that no one knew about, or nobody was paying any attention to, which of course made half of the property already unable to be used, because the archaeologists had to then investigate it, which was very depressing to the owner initially. But remember, there's an activating force and there's a restraining force. We can reconcile these things if we actually look deeply. So he wanted to put all the casitas on the beach, which is not a great place to put anything, because then erosion happens and the beach dune system breaks down. And we actually volunteered to leave the project then, because we said we're not going to work on a system that destroys an ecosystem. That's not our work. We're here to represent nature and support nature, not subvert it in the name of making a dollar. And he reminded us, he said you could reconcile everything. So he said, I want you to reconcile this. And so what we ended up doing after a few hour, very intense meeting, we ended up realizing that we could actually make very low tree houses on these coconut palms and not have to do foundations, which would create nick points, which create erosion. And this was everybody loved this idea. We built it out of all natural materials, local materials. And in fact, here's the studies we were doing, the tests we were doing on carrying weight and the lashings to hold them up. So that's what we proceeded with. Also, another reconciling issue is that this is a turtle sanctuary. A lot of turtles lay their eggs here. And these guys are poachers, and they were making a lot. They were basically just killing the turtles for their eggs and for their meat. And the reconciler was to actually make them protectors of the turtles. So they became the guardians of the turtles, which was a great, and they actually made more money doing that than poaching. So everybody was happy. The point about this project is that when the owner first walked on the land with one of my colleagues, Tim Murphy, he met some of the elders in the village, and they were so knowledgeable and so wise that he said, I want to be in relationship with these guys. We're just not here to hire people to help us wait on tables and cook and to make beds. These people are really important and full of wisdom that we can tap into. So he said, this project is not going to be about an eco-resort separate from the community. This is going to be part of the community. We are the community of Huachuca. In fact, the president of Guerrero, Mexico, offered an exit off the highway to serve this resort, and David Leventhal said, nope, we are going to come right through the village. And the village was really nothing to write home about. It's a small village of 500 people. It used to be 10,000 people in the Aztec tributary days, but it's basically a small trading spot on the highway. Now, look at the vibrancy. And because this eco-resort is not just about entertaining wealthy people from Mexico and the United States, it actually is a contributor to the education, to farming practices, farming practices, restoring the health of the watershed, restoring the habitat. He's had 2 permaculturists working there for the last decade, maybe not 2 anymore, but anyway, the whole idea is to begin to restore the whole system, the habitat, the water, the soil, the food, biodynamic farming. And as a result of that, even the visitors are investing and learning from this process. I actually ran across a woman in my town here in Boston, and she said, Bill, I was at this resort you worked on. She said, I am investing $250 in a little industry there. So people are coming away with a renewed sense of hope, and they're bringing energy with them outside of the resort itself. So we talked about working with potential and working on harmonizing, not compromising. Another principle is working in place. Every place we live is unique. Buenos Aires is different than New Orleans, is different than New York, is different than Boston. And if we don't understand why, that's no different than imposing my will on some human being and say, you're going to do what I want you to do, whether you like it or not. We have to learn from the place, from the patterns of life in that place. So life is local. And so what we have learned is that by working in place, we can actually understand it, and our projects can be inspired by that. So all living, and one other thing about place, let me go back to this. Elinor Ostrom, who won the Nobel Prize in 2009, basically proved that if we pay attention to places, the places on our planets, the watershed, the lifeshed in a community, we actually can take care of the ecosystem. Some of you may be familiar with Garrett Hardin's work, The Tragedy of the Commons, which basically says that we will abuse the earth until we destroy it, which we're doing right now. But what Elinor Ostrom proved is that if we work in place, we can manage and respond to the feedback that that place offers us and begin to heal it. And so the premise is we can't save the world. It's too big, it's too abstract, but we can save the world place by place. So here's the opportunity, folks. Place by place, work every place to fall in love with that place and help others to do the same. And we actually can transform the planet. The other complexity is that all living entities are connected to smaller and larger systems. Each entity, site, city, watershed, or self, family, community need to be add value to each other, or else we destroy that system too. There's no boundaries all the way out to the universe. So by actually thinking about how this place, call it the watershed, adds value to the bioregion, we can actually, and how that bioregion adds value to our place, how that watershed adds value to our community, we actually can begin to just be in reciprocal or mutually beneficial relationship. So the one question that we ask when we work in communities is, how big is here? And everyone knows how big here is. There's your boundary. It's not very hard. Another aspect is that when we typically work on projects with developers, we are working with the project, and the developer sees the site boundaries, maybe just a little bit outside the boundary. And then there's a transactional relationship with neighborhoods and forests and ecosystems and wetlands. Basically, you say, well, we might give you a swimming pool if you give us permission to build, and we'll build you a school if you give us permission to build, and we might damage this wetland less if you give us permission to build. That's a kind of a cost-benefit, very capitalist approach, and is kind of, well, it hasn't worked at all. We're destroying the earth this way. What a co-creative relationship asks of us is to look at the place, the community, and the ecological system, so that all of us are stakeholders. The developer is an equal stakeholder to every other stakeholder. No more important, no less important. That's a very important mental model shift. So there's a dance of reciprocity that goes on here. It's a reciprocal relationship. And what's really cool about this is that when we show the potential, when we go back to that word, it's really important, the potential for a place to be healthy, that energizes and inspires all these different stakeholders, including the developer, to work together in service of that. Once we understand what this place needs, then the project is informed by those ecological systems that tell us what to do. Now, we don't tell the developer not to build the project. We just say you can't, but you have no right to build the project you think you need to build. You need to work the project with the system that you're part of. We also tell the developer, we're not here to take away your profit. You deserve a profit for taking risk. But sometimes we found out that building no project at all is actually more profitable. So it gets quite complicated, but actually gets very beautiful because people get aligned around this potential. And they are, I can tell you, we've never seen a situation where they have not been motivated because of it. Loretto Bay is a project, an old project, one of our early ones, and it's not really that great a project itself, but the story is very interesting. So when it was going to be 5,000 units, 3 hotels, I don't remember exactly, it's been so long. But when we work with a place, this is the watershed. This is about 9,000 acres of land. And most people know the Baja is a desert. But the thing is, it wasn't a desert before the settlers came. 400 years ago, 450 years ago, it was actually a scrub oak forest and basically had a lot of water and a number of esteros, estuaries. Like we're sinking into one right there that has been buried. So the ecosystem had been destroyed by introducing grazing animals and row crop agriculture from Europe without understanding how a dry forest works. So you can see this gigantic estuary that was here, but it had been buried by erosion, and then the Mexican tourist group Faunatur further buried it, if you will, to establish land for development. What we learned is that there were essential patterns of life then. That essential pattern was a membrane exchange. That's what happens in estuaries. Fish are fed, shrimp are fed, and those fish they're the seedbed for the health of the Sea of Cortez. And this took us 6 months to figure out. It's remarkable how long it takes to figure out the simple. But what we were looking for is a vocation, a calling, a purpose for this place that would actually enliven and create a collaboration of all the different stakeholders in this region of Loreto. And that was regenerating the health of the Sea of Cortez. And it electrified everybody, because if the Sea of Cortez is unhealthy, the fishermen don't have business, the tourist groups don't have business, the developers don't have business, and the farmers don't even have the nutrients to actually replenish the bad soil that's there. So everyone was motivated around working together to regenerate the Sea of Cortez. And this created an incredible energy of co-creation. So the original plan had a concrete canals like in Venice. I don't know why they were concrete, but this is the original designers knew that they were dealing with a lowland area, but they didn't really understand their role in participating with nature. All we did when we came there is say, well, make this an estuary. And in fact, it circles around and connects with the ocean over here. Make this an estuary. And then what happened is that every home that was on the estuary they were given a covenant to plant and to tend the sweet, the black, white, and red mangrove trees. And you actually paid more money for these houses for the right to heal the ecosystem. But then 2008 happened and went bankrupt, and it went bankrupt 2 more times. But in 2011, it is actually still improving. And one of the reasons it's still improving is because the Homeowners Association, one of the most well-organized and powerful homeowner organizations in the world, emerged out of this. And the reason they emerged out of this is because of this architect, Iri Cunliffe, who was the head architect at Loretto. And he was so inspired by the idea of healing the Sea of Cortez and the role of architecture and people in that architecture to be able to restore the damaged ecosystems, that the real estate group trotted him out every time they flew a plane load of people into Loretto for these sales weekends, massive sales weekends. They would bring Irie out, and he was responsible, they said, for 90% of the sales, because what he was saying to them is this is the way the world needs to work. And so people bought homes not only because they wanted a second home or even a primary home, but they bought it because it was a vision of the way life needs to work. And look, even in 2013, way after 3 bankruptcies, Loretto is actually still on track. It's not doing perfect work at all, but the homeowners are working to actually keep that sustained, if you will, that evolutionary capacity. So working from the heart, not just working from place, but working from the heart is extremely important. And a book that I recommend reading is Sand Talk. It came out this year by an Aboriginal PhD, educated PhD, and he's an Australian Aborigine. The most destructive idea in existence: I am greater than you, you are less than me. This is the source of all human misery. All lawbreaking comes from that first evil thought, that original sin of placing yourself above the land or above other people. So this is the core of regeneration. It starts with you, or it starts with the system and changes you. But both of those are active. And I love what Kathia Laszlo says: sustainability is an inside job. Unless we are addressing what's inside of us, we are never going to heal what's outside of us. I wanted to share, well, I'm going to come back to that. Let me share one other case study, quick one. This is a project we're working on right now, except COVID has gotten in the way. This is in the Shenandoah Valley, about an hour and a half west of Washington, D.C. Pretty beautiful, huh? Anyway, Mike Marburg is basically building a small resort, and he is looking, I'm going to read this: when it comes to wellness and travel, affluent customers are looking for more than experiences. The next evolutionary step is transformation. And the global economy is shifting from a focus on esteem, meaning that gaining the recognition and approval of others, toward self-actualization, in which consumers frame purchasing choices in terms of how a product or service helps them reach their full potential, there's that word, and become who they dream of being. There's that other word too, being and becoming. So just to show you, this is real stuff and happening right now. This is just a master plan of the resort, rendering of the entrance building, rendering of the spa building. But let me read his quote here. We are using this project as an acupuncture point to catalyze dramatic change across the region, not just the site, related to food production, carbon sequestration, forest restoration, economic opportunity, and trauma resolution. Engaging local partnerships, federal funding, and organizational momentum, the potential for broad-based social transformation is profound. Leveraging presence into regional initiatives extending well beyond our borders. And I can assure you, That is what they are working on. And the whole valley is tremendously excited to work this way. So the point I want to raise from Tyson Yocumporta and Mike Marburg's point is that what we call 3 lines of work, we need to be working on evolving the way we live and engage in the places we work and live or occupy or vacation. We need to evolve in ways we work together, because unless we work together, we're never going to evolve the way we live. And we need to evolve who I am in order to effectively work together. Self-actualization, group actualization, and system actualization all go together. And eco-resorts tourism is actually an incredibly powerful way to engage all 3. So what's the purpose of regenerative tourism? I would make the premise that it's building the capacity to care and the capability to co-evolve in the community, the land, and the visitors, all 3 being effective. And what's really important is we're building a field of understanding. It's a field of energy. And now that may sound a little woo-woo to people, but a field is what happens when you walk by a house with a good party. That's a field. Or you walk into a conference room after there's an intense argument. It's a very negative field. That energy, we feel those fields. And fields are the fastest way that we can transform the planet. That woman that I met on the street in Boston, who was so excited about experiencing Playa Viva, she brought home a field of understanding that she carried back home with her. And that is the way we change the world. So taking away some takeaway actions here. There's a lot to absorb. Happy to send you these slides if you're interested. Your project, I love telling this to architects and developers, your project is not the project. If these architects and developers are interested in sustainability and then of course regeneration, and by the way, you cannot have a sustainable system or a sustainable society without regenerating our relationship, because life changes, life evolves, and unless we evolve with it, we will still destroy the planet. We actually have to be conscious. And the way we become conscious is building this in. And let me get to the last point. This is a practice that was also noted before in that earlier panel. Your project is not the project. The project is the larger system you're part of. We need to understand the potential for social and ecological health in each place we work. That means we need to add value towards evolutionary health. To do so, we need to integrate stakeholders to serve and develop that potential. Everybody's an expert in their own domain. Integrating them together to serve that larger potential is how we have massive change. Then we can inform the project with the above, and those projects become so much more meaningful. Now here's the rub. This requires community practice. Nothing worthwhile that's ever done is not done through practice. You cannot just have a change management weekend or a transformation week. It takes years to play an instrument, to learn a language. By the way, thank you for letting me speak in English. Portuguese is not something I've ever studied. And you need 3 to 5 years of guided practice for this to actually transform and the people to own that evolutionary process. Then they evolve forever. So I want to end with this quote. This is about partnering people and places to heal ecosystems and the human spirit. And so I end with that note. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bill. Really, thank you. Eu imagino que vocês...
I can only imagine. I can only imagine that you most likely connected all the dots of all the dots that what we've been presenting since the very first panel at this farm. Bill could bring all his knowledge, all his know-how, all the theories developed in regenerative design. Practice, expression that we've been using since yesterday in all panels that we shared with you. So I think it's clear for you now that from this class that Bill could show us And mind you, I could spend 2-3 hours listening to Bill talk nonstop because everything he says really touches my heart and it makes all the sense. For those who don't know me, knows I am the kind of person who is really used to running major projects. And this project, this purpose that Bill brings, we know it is feasible. And Bill is here bringing proof of what is possible to do. I just want to highlight some uh, notes. So, before I pass the floor to Bento, I really like when Bento speak about representing nature. Maybe we human beings indeed have this major role where of which we're not really aware of. Maybe due to the fact that we created human beings out of a language code and we're able to communicate clearly, symbolically, what we think, our past, our future, our dreams. I think our role, perhaps as human beings, in this ecology, using thus Bill's terminology. By the way, I thought it was amazing the words. Maybe our role is indeed to represent nature. So I think this is a great point of reflection so that we can all think. Bill was not with us in the Amazon panel. He was rather, he joined us just after it started, and you heard him about the influence and the importance of native peoples in the preservation of our ecology and the ecology of our planet. I actually would like him to quickly repeat, Bill, if you don't mind, because it was a slide right at the beginning. If you may, if we had in our very second morning panel, a panel fully dedicated to the Amazon. And in this particular panel, we had two scientists, one anthropologist and one chemical engineer, who live in an Amazon region that, as we know, actually the whole world knows what the current scenario is at Amazon, what we're actually living at Amazonia, at this very precious biome, not only for the country but the whole planet. And the two scientists during the panel were joined by two other representatives from a community, Xikrin community, a Xikrin indigenous community, and they've been suffering a lot due to illegal evasions, lack of protection from federal government and institutions. Also, they're suffering with the fires. In short, I'm sure everybody is following, everybody's hearing about what's been happening in the Amazon. So it was very intense indeed. I'll send you later this material, Bill, because when the Xikrin lady, Kokoti, her name was Kokoti, when this Xikrin indigenous lady started speaking about what they've been living in Amazon, she started crying. She burst into tears. And everybody who was watching also burst into tears. And you didn't see this, and you sitting in Boston right now in the USA, you, without us planning this beforehand or speaking about this, you brought exactly that, the importance of ancestral peoples in the preservation of our planet and of our human being experience in nature. So could you go back to this point and elaborate this point further, if you may? Would you recap and elaborate further this point in your presentation? Thank you.
Sure. So you're speaking about the quote about California peoples, when humans are gone from an area long enough? Is that the quote you're keying off of? Well, I can tell you that we work all over the world, and we work with many indigenous peoples, and we always find that the we look for patterns of human relationship with the system, and the indigenous peoples carry that naturally with them. We Europeans in our reductionist culture don't. So any place we go, we try to tap into indigenous knowledge because it gives us a clue to the trajectory of health in that system, because they've been paying attention. We think we can manage nature. They actually work in a reciprocal relationship with nature, and so they're paying much more. And I'm not talking about many. That's not all indigenous peoples, though. We've got to be careful about romanticizing any society, but the indigenous peoples of the world, the Maori in New Zealand, and the Aborigines, and certainly the northern Indian tribes in the U.S. and Canada are the ones I'm most familiar with. They're the wisdom keepers. I don't know what I think I don't know if that's apparent to everybody because you haven't interacted with them, but it is. And what's really important is to actually slow down. And I'm a type A personality, so for me, most my life lesson has been to slow it. I never, when I was young, I could never work with indigenous peoples, and now I find I would rather work with no one else, which means I've grown up a little. And because the storytelling embodies those, and it's the reason I was trying to tell stories today. It embodies so much more than just the facts, and so it's a way of being, not just a way of doing. And so one of the things we need to learn, and I'm not saying many current modern indigenous tribes need to relearn this too, is that it's just not doing anymore. It's a way of being and becoming. I'll stop there because I'll probably dig a hole if I go any deeper.
Perfeito, Bill.
Perfect, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. And I think the invitation is here, is on the table, so that we can hear you deeper. We can get deeper on this, because I think we'll have the opportunity to think of plans and projects together so that we can bring more and more your message, your proposals, so that we bring this to spread this knowledge, this knowing the way you are
May I
and
say
what you
one
have
more thing?
behind.
May I say one more thing, please?
Yes, please.
I think a model for the world, the most effective, and I know many Native peoples talk about the need to reconcile and harmonize Western and indigenous worldviews, because both are powerful. And I'm reminded of Tecumseh, the famous, well, he may not be famous to you, but in North America, he's famous as the Shawnee tribe chief who almost united all the diverse tribes to beat the United States. He almost did it. And I say that with enthusiasm. And when he first saw a book, he said, "Oh no, the white man has frozen the word." He was incredibly depressed about it. And yet, he also saw how powerful it was. And he learned how to read as a result. And the point is that it's not an either or, that we need to actually, if you will, the activating force might be indigenous peoples, the restraining force might be Western worldview, but we need to reconcile. And New Zealand is the best example on the planet in terms of being on that, working towards that. So I highly recommend tapping into what the Maori are doing and the New Zealand and the conscious New Zealanders. So just as that was been my experience.
I agree. I agree fully with you, Bill. I've been to New Zealand. I've had the chance and I was impressed. as to this relationship between native peoples and European communities. And not only that, New Zealand, I actually have traveled the world. I've spent about 37 years traveling 6 months a year per year. And New Zealand was the country, the best preserved, best cared for country that I've ever been to. And it was very curious because I remember the one tour with a local guide. Clearly, the local guide of European ascendancy, heritage. And we were talking about this topic because this topic that has enchanted me for many years. And I actually turned around to him and I said, we have in São Paulo two rivers that cross our city that are absolutely dead. He could not believe what I said because he can't really grasp a river water that is not absolutely pure, drinkable. So that
Well,
is it.
may I interrupt there? The New Zealanders aren't perfect, and there's a lot of with the new dairy farming practices that they've implemented. They are actually destroying their rivers. They're aware of it, but you've got these forces, so it's not a perfect place by any means.
Ok. Eu estive na Nova Zelândia.
I was in New Zealand. I was in New Zealand. It was a few years ago. So most likely, this situation had not arrived, but I left with a very strong positive impression of New Zealand.
As
And
you
the other thing I would like to highlight about your talk that I would like to mental when you said, Bill, that to think about saving the whole world can be a task, a rather impossible, a Hercules type of task. And your proposal is to save the world place by place. I am the type of person that has always thought and run grand projects with 7,000 travelers, World Cup with 7,000 passengers, 130 different groups. So when people would come up to me and say, wow, this task will be very difficult, and I'd say, I'm not thinking of the whole task. I'm thinking about the first step. After I deliver the first, I'll think of the second. And that is something, when you get to the Maps website, this quote actually comes up. It is a pop-up sentence, step by step thing to act, to think globally and act locally. I know this is a classic quote in sustainability, but it's a very special quote so that people do not lose faith or do not get discouraged, rather, when faced to this purpose to change the world. Because when we think about changing the world, we always say, you're just a drop of the ocean. I'm not going to make a difference. But I've already said this before in this forum, now I'm repeating, that is drop by drop that the ocean is made of. So that we make the ocean. So if everybody takes on to them to make a difference in their location and acting that way, place by place, will change the world.
May I share
So,
something with you? There are only, let me see, 4,037 cities on the planet larger than 100,000 people. Actually, not that many. There's 1.5 million smaller, but 4,037. If we get the typical tipping point is known as 3.5%, the 100th monkey. So that means 141 cities. If we actually transform 141 places or cities, we will save the earth. Because the field will have been set and everybody will do it. But we have to get those 141. So that's a premise, I acknowledge.
Yes. I'm on it. Sensacional, Bill.
amazing, Bill. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Truly wonderful to hear you. Now I would like to invite Bento to join us in this inspiring motivating talk and transformative talk. Bento, welcome. It is a pleasure to be with you. And I would like to hear from you. Tell us how you have received Bill's words and what you've been doing and what you think we can do.
Wonderful. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I'm very grateful, Carla. Bill, it was a pleasure to hear you, to get to know you. It's very interesting from the Brazilian perspective to see this regenerative design based on intuition. We do not have a lot of references here. We do not have written references. We're still trying to find it in Bill Morrissey and some people that have left their contributions, and we have been studying it and applying it and adapting it to the Brazilian context. Brazil is a mega diverse country with regions that have unique characteristics. And this set of knowledge is a reference so we can have this more caring outlook, more to look to the landscape and look at the interaction of living organisms and understanding that this is life. Look at the ground as skin that breathes and perspirates and absorbs and creates life. It's very interesting. I'll try to tell about the Brazilian context, what we have been seeing in this movement when it comes to, as Jussara said, as people have been discussing, understanding what is sustainability, what is regeneration, what do these words mean. They have a whole cultural package that is transferred, and each one has a different moment, and things advance towards change, towards changing a paradigm. As you said, Bill, at the start of the conversation, we are in a transitional stage, in a paradigm shift that is quite important. This changing from looking to nature and thinking about exploiting it and consuming resources without any awareness of inputs and outputs, to being completely dependent on energy matrices that are very impactful, our natural reserves being placed out of balance with natural mechanisms. And we see nature being used in an exploitative manner. So this growth that we have been watching, we heard Besserman to giving the historical point of view for the colonization processes, the expansion and industrialization, having nature as the support for that growth. And today we see a changing paradigm. When we see a forum like this, when we have many people talking about the best ways in which we can manage our resources, that we can create relationship with people, that we can look at social movements, that we can have more attention to the social and cultural environment, we see that there are signs of a paradigm shift, for a paradigm of caring, to no longer exploiting but caring instead, paying attention, cooperating, interacting towards growth. So we see over the last few years that this conversation is moving towards designed to regenerative cultures for environments where we can truly have an interaction for growth, for complexity. That is, there's actually a synchronism inside of entropy. Instead of consuming energy, consuming resources, we move to a society where we have cooperation towards these processes and helps increase the life. So we see in this paradigm change some of the structural issues, environmental issues, and here they are being shown in several ways in the economy, in the pandemic, and the ways that we are seeing signs of the earth. We're being the that the way we are managing systems are not working. These are signs that we need to take care of what we still have left to save it for the future, or we will become extinct. As Besserman said, the planet will continue here. We are living in this planet, we evolve with it, but in a certain way we are being spoiled rats who are not cooperating with their mother. So we truly have been seeing in this paradigm change a light in the end of the tunnel. Because it's interesting for us working in these movements. We've been doing it for a good while. And this idea of his generation has been growing and becoming more intense. When we saw the whole process of sustainability for a slow growth that it had for a stage of intensification, the use of the word and the concept, and then we had a stage where we had an adaptation, familiarity of people, and understanding that we needed to do something, having something grow and remain and change, and the awareness was raised, and now it's a vision that this is not only necessary, but we are seeing the advent of a new outlook, an outlook that we truly have adapt with Earth, not only in the sense that we cohabitate here, but we need to create conditions so that the Earth can continue in its path with growth and complexity. We see here in Brazil, in movements that are a bit old, they've been happening for 12, 15 years, thinking about methodologies and principles that guide these changes, that guide this transition. We see in permaculture, in regenerative design, in the agroforest, things that have gathered strength in Brazil because of the crisis we have been going through. When I'm talking about crisis, I'm not just talking about economic crisis or social crisis, which are more evident, but the crises that lead to these paradigm changes. You're studying at a university and something doesn't make sense for you, and you're studying something that does not fit into a perspective for the future vision. You start broadening your view about a culture that is more integrated, and you start seeing the way things work and were established in our thought. They are truly limited in this view of what is new, this integrated, holistic view. But since we have this whole internet movement, globalization, and all this pandemic movement, quarantine, people being forced to rethink, people having access to a moment such as this, when you're talking about the US, when we have people in several countries, such as this meeting here, discussing it. At times we're a little bit anxious to see changes coming fast. I want this regeneration to be here, this future to be here. But now this is happening naturally and a lot faster. So in a few months that we've been living in this quarantine, this movement of people from this, in the first stage, people were scared, trying to understand what was happening, trying to understand what that routine was not working well, and that now they need to rethink it. And then when this new knowledge is opened up, this broader knowledge of life, we see effective change happening. As a permaculturist here in Brazil, and as a facilitator as well in courses and programs, in the last few years we see a lot of adherence. Out of 50 people, 40 take the course and will plant a little garden. They will look at the land not only as landscape, but also as life, as a living creature. They start interacting with these environments with integration. And the endobiont, a being that is integrated to the forest. And we are seeing this happening in a very interesting way in the last few months. And this makes me hopeful that this will move fast, and I will participate in it. And it's very, very exciting to watch this awakening that brings people a meaning of life. We talk about our true role. Our role is to accelerate forests and the nature, to spread out seeds. There are several principles that, if we based on the natural function, we bring them to our life. And they make a whole lot of sense. So we have a lot of accumulated knowledge in our societies, but this knowledge had more sense during certain times and certain contexts. Human beings build different types of knowledge, but the principles of nature are the same. The way it operates, its complexity, and its interrelations are unique. There's this stability, this basis that was built with iron and water and fire. So what we have now is the reference of something we are a part of, and that has a level of intelligence and complexity that we cannot comprehend. We can see science, we can see experiments and so on, new discoveries. So we see this search for knowledge, for agriculture, or just the fact of building a shelter. You start seeing this in a much more interesting way that is much more integrated with a greater meaning. So this is what we've been observing in this dynamics contrasting culture based on regeneration. It's bringing back the light towards life. When we bring this to tourism, I had the opportunity of working with tourism for many, many years with traditional communities. I always understand tourism as something that is a trendsetter. When we work here in Brazil with permaculture, ecological agriculture, and topics that are not quite relevant in the political landscape in the country for a series of factors, we try to find in these sectors some sort of strength to try and bring contexts and practices that can be wider spread with this structure. So when we work with permaculture, we will not say that this system is broken and that this system will not work. That's not the idea. We want to understand what we have, what are the resources we have, and work with them in a different perspective. That's what we've been talking about, a paradigm shift. We should not rebuild the structures. This is the structure of a resort that has already been installed in a way where we had high spend of energy to build it. That was built in a different way. We accept that, we bring that in, and we use this to change our outlook with the view that we can integrate the community and create mechanisms for local governance, and you can integrate to bioregional characteristics to understand that Brazil, if we look very closely to each bioregion we have in Brazil, we have several Brazils into one. And this is connected to the type of soil, to the type of food, to the people, and a series of other factors. So this experience of bringing life and bringing relationships that are more based on the microregions and environments truly provides a lot of sense for the experience of visiting. There are some questions I wanted to clarify, but I'm saying some words that some people might not be familiar with. But I'm sorry, I had to move the light. I have some bugs walking around here. In permaculture here in Brazil, we have a reference of principles and design methods that try in a certain way to optimize the management of local resources. So in Brazil, we understand that the Pia construction of the or the case studies that Bill showed, they use the palm trees, right? The coconut trees to build the resort. I'm from a region here in the Northeast. The first house I built was in the same way. So people naturally were still seeing it as a construction element. But sometimes they wouldn't think of it and bring wood from the Amazon or from other regions at a high cost. So if we look at the resources we have at hand and we know how to use them, we know how to use them properly so that it can be permanent or can be used for a longer time, the longest time possible. So permaculture is looking towards local resources. It's the interaction with environments so that they can serve multiple functions. They can be multifunctional. The interaction between elements that are part of the landscape or part of a structure or a facility. And there's also the principle in forestry where we've been discussing in regeneration that it is based on the ecosystems in nature. So we are used here in Brazil to having a way of doing agriculture that was imported. It uses the land as its support. It has a high cost in terms of inputs, in cash, a high environmental impact for production. And here in Brazil, we have people and institutions, scientists, agriculturists, producers that have understood our biomes, our ecosystems. So we have experts in Cerrado, in the rainforest, and the Amazon. So agroforestry is a line of knowledge that is being developed here in Brazil, and that is developing a much wider sense of food safety and security, of water security, because using agroforestry is planting lives. You're planting water when you're providing new trees. So when we do our cultures, when we think about the environment, oh, but there's no water in this area. We can plant water. If you analyze the landscape, the microbasins, the region where you're in,
fazer mecanismo, né,
water is there. We need to activate the regenerative mechanisms of that environment so we can go back to work, so we can work with it and live with the natural cycles in the environment. So the regenerative design today is rethinking the way to build, to deal with waste, having ecological sanitation, to find ways how to produce food in an abundant, biodiverse way, using the principles based on local ecosystems. We are trying to create new production chains, creating positions where people can truly have production chains that are local and that are able to truly reanalyze this way. It's difficult to have agroforestry production and to have the market mechanisms as we have in moving these products. When we think about the forest, we think about articulating locally so that we can have local distribution of these resources in the region without having the need to use transportation, to have high energy costs. Regeneration in Brazil is already being developed and taught and experimented on for a few years now. And I really wish to have exchange with other countries that are already applying these practices. I had the opportunity to visit some of these places in other countries, and I see how this is a common conception. It's not something that came from a certain country or a specific scientist that created it and is setting that forth as a new trend. This is something that is coming up out of the heart, out of people's minds, out of their lives. People that are more in tune, that are paying more attention, that are trying to care for themselves, for their communities, and for nature. These people are finding that same knowledge. And this collective osmosis, when we see that there's no manipulation of information, or that there's a trend being imposed so that people will understand a certain way. This comes from Earth, from the cosmos. This is knowledge that is in the cloud for us to download and to experiment and adapt to your lifestyle. I don't know if I'm going over time here. I can barely hear Carla. I think we're coming to a close here, but as always, you have been very inspiring. I will ask Bill a question, and I'll ask him to give us his remarks on what you said, and we can move from there to our final remarks. Bill, we have a question from our sponsor. We have a majority sponsor here in the forum, the Agia Group. And the question they've asked is, what are the main challenges when it comes to planning touristic destinations based on regenerative design? What can you tell us about this? And in case you want to add any comments and the beautiful speech by Bento, please go right ahead.
Okay. I would say the biggest challenge is to restrain the developer, the client, the operator from wanting to solve the problems or address the needs of the project without understanding the cultural context and the ecological, environmental context. And they think, and we also work with, let me just share this with you in, I don't have this on a screen, but you can follow, can you see my hand?
Yes.
So if you start up here, it's think about, these are we call levels of thought. Belief, philosophy, principles, concept, strategies, design, implement, audit, evaluate. Most projects begin at concept, strategies, and design. There are very few projects that begin with belief, philosophies, and principles. We find out that if you take 1 or 2 months and work on that, and including what the land believes of itself, right? The patterns that we observe in the land, if you actually work on belief, philosophies, and principles, it seems like you're going slow, but it will save you years of time. Literally years of time. But average people say that they save on work when we work with them is 18 months, just like nature restoring itself. So 18 is it's a very powerful word. In Hebrew, it means life, by the way, chai. So there's something about number 18, which is very important. I don't know what you're going to do with that information, but so slowing down to go fast, and slowing down for the right reason, not just to waste time, but it will speed you up and you make your project so much more effective and powerful. I'm complete.
Perfeito.
Perfect. Bento, do you have any further remarks? Bill, more remarks? Do you have any further remarks? We're nearly finished now. We're coming to a close. And indeed, I have no words to thank the participation of these two grandmasters, of these two masters. We have several questions that have been submitted, but we have already gone over our time. So I'm thinking later, these questions I can email them to you.
Sure.
Bento, I can email questions too, so you can address them later, and later we can share with everybody your answers. But before I close, I would like to hear your final remarks. And I would like to read a text right at the end. So if you have any final observations, go right ahead.
I'm complete. Thank you.
I just want to close by thanking. A big thank you to Carla, to the whole team. It's a major forum. I know this is a dream that she has been dreaming for some time. She's been pursuing this, and Carla has this energy of really taking the lead, of really spearheading very important topics. We've been working together in a field, and when we see people as enthusiastic as Carla, who is moved by passion, really moved by the heart, and for this reason, this awareness of creating the means and making other people aware and disseminating information. It's really a driving force so that we can have effective change. They are absolutely necessary and very welcome. I'm very thankful, Carla.
I want to support that.
I thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, you are already officially invited to come to Brazil. Come stay at my place. Bento lives in an eco-villa. You're also invited to stay at his place. We'll put you up and we will work together. There are several contributions, a lot more work to do ahead together.
Well, I've never been to Brazil, so I'm going to take you up on that, Carla.
Me too. You're invited, Bill. Coming from me. We will be good hosts. So it will be a pleasure to welcome you.
Well, likewise. You can come visit me too.
Thank you. Wonderful. I have this final text to read. So we wrap. I'll ask Bento to please mute your microphone. Thank you. I started the forum designing, actually setting up a question. And if not us, who? If not now, when? Those are the questions that we opened the first MAPS forum, Sustainable Tourism Forum. Simple and direct, those were the questions that moved us in the realization of this forum that gathered 32 expert panelists, researchers, representatives of ancestral peoples, institutions, and national and international institutions. By concluding this event and the position that we occupy today as organizers and economic stakeholders in the three sectors, tourism, event, and sustainability, that actually name our forum, it is our responsibility to offer answers that we hope will be only the first ones that will actually lead to concrete actions to change planning parameters and update practices and objectives of the segments by aligning SDGs and impacting more and more positively people's life. After Bill's talk, I would say not only aligning SDGs, but going a step ahead. Now being able to move towards regeneration. If not us, who? We answer by starting with initiative and the accomplishment of this forum. Yes, us. This is the answer to the first question. If not now, when? Now, it is our answer to our second question. The when is now. And here, the forum was just the first, the most immediate step that we've taken. I speak on my behalf and on behalf of everyone who are part of this, from designing, creating the forum, the talks that we had in our panels, as well as of our entire audience. This is indeed our first step. With it, we managed to gather and connect to the one objective. And we gathered and found together sustainable different sectors: tourism, event, and travel. We found benchmark speakers, keynote speakers, and we managed to bridge gaps. We opened dialogues and exchange of ideas and experience. We have started seeding some works that we shall nurture. We have here Maria Aparecida and Abia from Fortaleza, Catarina, director from Sustainability Director from Gothenburg, Switzerland, Projeto Bagagem, that encompass the most community-based tourism in Brazil, Raízes DS, Freedom Route, Costa Rica, represented by Ana Thaís, Regeneration, Agrofloresta, the UN, NWTL, IATA, ABIAR, SIDE, so on and so forth. So we have had some amazing experiences, some amazing sharing, and all driven by the one purpose. Ultimately, finally, we would like to set a proposition, because our question, due to honesty and coherence, necessarily needs to follow the next ones. If not this way, how? And indeed, I believe education, attitude, effort, personal and individual effort, and mainly from corporations, companies, and reviewing calculation parameters and moving to paradigms that impact positively people and nature, and a disposition, a willingness to create together, co-create these new paradigms. Bill and Bento both have shown alternatives, concrete ways that have already been used, experimented. What the teams that they are leading, we have a number of sensational examples. So indeed, we are here, have a request, an appeal to create a pact with all of us who are here together, so that we can more and more join forces, co-create, create and co-create. Co-create has been a word that we heard in every single panel in this forum, so that we can all together truly have a legacy. Just like Juscelia said, not only a legacy for some time from now onwards. This is our responsibility. If not us, who? And if not now, when? And how we've started showing the way. So I thank Bento, I thank Bill, as well as all other speakers who have been with us: Sérgio Bergman, Mariana Gross, Benoit, Sidney Alonso, Michael Gill, Mônica Samo, Fernando Souza, Oliver Regan, Ana Baez, Alexandre Carrido, Carol Muti, Catherine Thornton, Beatriz Góes, Leia Gerger, Maria Aparecida, Ricardo Ferreira, Eduardo Sanovitz, Tony Sando, Roberta Nunes, Thaís Mantovanelli, Marcelo Salazar, Coroire Chicrim, Cocote Chicrim, Poliana Oliveira, Mariana Madureira, Jussara Rocha, Solange Barbosa, Ana Dueck, And I also would like to thank, I'm actually speechless, the entire team that has supported in designing and realization of the farm. Marcela, Yara, Martina, Rogério, and Vanusa, who have been on my side all the time. It is with you that we will be able to call this responsibility to us so that we can truly, in fact, start making a difference. I thank everybody who's been with us. I thank our sponsors, our partners, and we count on you. Just like Bill said, we need amplify this network. We must be all together. So big hug, in a big hug, looking after nature that we're all part of. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bento. Thank you, everybody. It's been an immense pleasure, and I hope and I look forward to keep in touch. And who knows, maybe we're already getting ready for in 1 year time to be together again in the second MAPS form. Bill, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Bento, thank you so much. Good evening to all. Thank you. Thank you, the production team. And we are together. We're all on the same boat, on the same ship, our planet. A big kiss to everybody. Good night.